I'm sure you know that there are t-shirts that cost €5 and others that cost 25. But there are also t-shirts that cost €100 or 200 or even 2000. So you might be wondering, what is the difference between all those t-shirts? What are you paying for, whether you're paying €5 or 500? So we are going to dive into all of these because I'm a designer, my expertise is in lingerie actually, but I happen to be quite familiar about garment pricing because I used to have my own lingerie brand, so I had to know how to price my products. So you might be wondering, why t-shirts? And it's because it's a relatively simple garment and we don't have to account for all the millions of different materials that go into making, for example, a bra. And also because I actually got the idea for this video while I was reading an article about the white t-shirt that is used in the TV series The Bear. So we will be talking about this particular t-shirt because it's very interesting, but also because while I was reading about how it's very special, the way that it's manufactured, I happened to see at the corner of the website an ad for another white t-shirt that was from Shein or Temu, I don't remember exactly. So I thought, isn't this ironic that I'm reading about a garment that is of exceptional quality and all that, and I'm seeing an ad about apparently the same kind of garment that costs probably like 10 times less? So I decided to do a deep dive and see how that can be possible. So let's take a look at our two example t-shirts. One of them is a random t-shirt from Shein. It's a white t-shirt. It costs €2, and I have to say that I went into Shein's website for the first time just to do this video, and now I have seen things that I cannot unsee. But anyway, then we have this other t-shirt that is the one that was used for the bear, and it's made by a German company called Mert B. Swanen, something like that. I'm not going to pretend that I speak German. So this is also a basic white t-shirt, but on the company's website, we are told that they are made with special machinery that is from the 1900s to the 1960s. And these machines create the fabric for these t-shirts in a tubular way, which means that this t-shirt doesn't have side seams. But aside from the fact about the side seams, they all look pretty much the same in the product picture, but one of them costs €2 and the other costs 95. So what's the reason behind that pricing? Let's take a look of what goes into pricing a garment. So we can divide the price of a garment into parts. One is the cost that it takes to produce it, so the cost of the materials and the manufacturing, and then the rest is what we could call profit, but we will see that is not actually net profit. So first, let's make a guess about what is the cost of manufacturing each one of these t-shirts. Let's start with the materials. Let's say that each one of these t-shirts takes around 0.8 meters of fabric. In the case of Shein's t-shirt, it's a polyester fabric, which is kind of one of the cheapest fabrics because it's essentially plastic. Polyester is essentially plastic. And also Shein buys the fabric in super big quantities, which means that the price per meter tends to be very, very low. So for example, we could guess that the price per meter of this fabric is €0.5. And we also don't get any information about the weight of this fabric, which is something that will affect the price. So the heavier the fabric is, it's supposed to be more expensive because it won't be sheer, it will have a better drape, and also means that more threads have been used to create it. So the fabric from the Shein t-shirt, we don't get any information about the weight, but we have this note here that says that it's not sheer. So we can say that maybe it's a mid-weight fabric of around 240 grams per square meter. Now, the other t-shirt, let's call it Carmi's t-shirt because there's no way that I'm going to pronounce the name of that brand every time. So we see on the website that it uses 100% organic cotton fabric of 245 grams per square meter. But the cost per meter of this fabric is a bit harder to guess because, as we said, it's created in a very unique way. And it says in the website that it takes around 20 times more time to create this fabric than what you would take with a modern knitting machine. And also what is interesting about this kind of fabric, of tubular fabric, is that it allows the factory to create the garment at the same time that they are creating the fabric. So they are knitting the fabric, knitting the yarns in a tubular way, and that's creating the body of the t-shirt. And then I'm guessing that they will take some parts of that tubular fabric and extend that and cut from there the sleeves or the details at the collar. So in terms of how do we price this fabric, let's say that a normal cotton fabric, we can buy that wholesale for around 5 or 6 euros per meter. But this fabric, let's say that it may cost several times more. So maybe we can say around 18 euros per meter. Again, this is not super accurate because of the way that this t-shirt is produced, but I think that we can get that as a baseline for our calculations. Now, to that fabric cost, we would have to add the cost of the trims, the labels, and the thread, and also the packaging materials. For Shein, we can guess that it's going to come on a plastic bag and that is going to have nothing special on the tags or the labels. So we can maybe price that at 0.5 euros. And then for Carmi's t-shirt, the brand tells us that they work with a small business, a local small business that creates cardboard boxes, custom designed for them. And they also have like custom tags, custom labels. So that's likely to be more expensive. So let's say that that is 1.5 euros. So that means that the cost of the materials, both the fabric and the trims for these two t-shirts, is as follows. So the Shein t-shirt is around 0.9 euros and Carmi's t-shirt would be around 14.4 euros. Now, the other side of the production cost of a garment is the labor cost. So the time that it takes to cut, sew, and package this item. And let's remember that all clothing is handmade, so it's made by people. It doesn't matter that it's made in China or that it's made in Germany. And all of those people should have fair working conditions and a living wage. So for the Shein t-shirt, we know that this is made in factories that are organized for efficiency, and that means that the workers there don't make an individual t-shirt, but they just make one single operation of making a t-shirt and repeat that action again and again and again. So that means that the time for creating a t-shirt can be super low, around 4 to 5 minutes per t-shirt, maybe even less. So let's say it's 5 minutes. We can add to that around a minute and a half for cutting and packaging the garment. We are not going to spend a lot of time cutting the garment because in factories like Shein, they cut several layers of fabric at once. So they can cut potentially dozens or even hundreds of garments in a very small amount of time. And also they are packaging that in a plastic bag, so it doesn't take a lot of time to do that. So in total, we can say that our t-shirt is made in 6.5 minutes. For Carmi's t-shirt, the brand tells us that they are made in Germany in fair working conditions, whatever that means for this particular brand, but maybe it means that they don't have such a strict division of labor as the Shein factory, so they may take a bit longer to create this t-shirt. But on the other hand, the t-shirt doesn't have side seams, so we don't have to account for extra time for making those. However, the time for cutting, I think, is going to be longer because if they have to lay flat that tubular fabric to cut the sleeves and the details, that means that they cannot cut a lot of garments at once. So it's going to likely be way more time than what Shein takes to cut one t-shirt. So let's say that to sew this t-shirt, we take around 8 minutes, to package it around 2 minutes because they have to be on these like nice cardboard boxes, and then to cut the garment, that is going to take a bit longer, probably around 10 minutes. So in total, Carmi's t-shirt can be made in around 20 minutes from start to finish. So how all of this translates into money? We know that Shein's t-shirt is made in China, and China doesn't have a countrywide minimum wage. It's set locally, and in the most common places for manufacturing clothing in China, it's around €1 per hour. However, what complicates this calculation a bit is that a lot of garment workers are not paid by the hour in China, but instead per piece. So actually that forced them to work really, really fast and also to do very long hours. So they don't do 40-hour work weeks. They can do almost like double that, and they don't get paid if they make mistakes or if they take some time to rest or if they go to the bathroom. But let's say that this particular factory, it's a bit more fair than most and pays workers by the hour and pays them €1 per hour, which is the minimum wage. So the cost of manufacturing a t-shirt that takes around 6.5 minutes to make would be around €0.1. Then for Carmi's t-shirt, we know that the minimum wage in Germany it's around €12.8 per hour as of 2025. So let's say that we are paying our workers around €14 per hour. If our t-shirt takes 20 minutes to make, the cost of the labor for that time would be around €4.6. Now you might notice something funny here, and it's that the cost of the labor for Carmi's t-shirt it's more than double of the final selling price of Shein's t-shirt. But let's continue. So far, we have a t-shirt that costs 0.9 in material costs and 0.1 in labor costs. So that gives us a production cost of around €1. And here the material in this case is costing around 9 times more than the cost of the labor. And the other t-shirt is €14.4 for the materials and around €4.6 for the labor. So in total, it will be €19. Now there are actually more costs on the production side of the pricing. Those are the costs that are referred to the wastes of materials and sometimes the waste of time, because workers are human beings, so they can make mistakes, or some scraps of fabric are considered waste, or also people need to rest, people need to take breaks and go to the bathroom. So you would usually add a small percentage to that production cost to compensate for all that. But to make things a bit simple, we are not going to add that here. It still seems that looking at the selling price of both items, that one of them has a bigger markup than the other. Carmi's t-shirt costs around €19 to make, and it's being sold for €95. So that seems that there is a profit of €76, right? Well, not really, because all of that profit is not actually profit, and that's what we are going to see now. So, if you have a clothing brand, your garments don't design themselves, and the pattern doesn't appear one day on the factory floor ready to be cut, and your clothes don't magically travel to your customers' homes whenever they make a purchase. If you have a brand, just like any other business, you would have what is called operating costs, and those are necessary to keep your brand up and running. You need to pay for a designer or a designer team to design your garments. You need to pay for a pattern maker to create the patterns and grade them so that they fit across all of your size range. Both designers and pattern makers probably need specialized software that you would have to provide, or if you are hiring external designers or pattern makers, they will have to charge you, like they will have that factor in their price. You would also have to account for the development phase in your product, which it means that the factory will have to create several samples and they would have to be fitted so that you can refine the fit and the design details of each style. And this stage particularly can get costly when you are developing new styles, but if you skip it, it will be very likely that you end up selling a product that doesn't fit right and your customers will return it. Also, if you're doing your manufacturing in-house, like this German brand, you will need to pay for machinery and repairs of that machinery. You also need to pay for shipping for all the materials and also for the the garments themselves. You will need office supplies, you will need an accounting software, you will need a shopping platform on a website, and your website needs pretty pictures depicting your garment in the best possible way to attract your customers. So you will need to pay for photo shoots with photographers, models, stylists, and makeup artists. And of course, you have to pay your taxes, your energy bill, and any other business expenses. And also, in case you have employees that are not directly tied to the production side of the business, so they are more in the administrative part of your brand, you also have to factor in their wages. It's very difficult to calculate the cost of all of that per garment. You can do some kind of approximation if you round up all of your costs per month and then you divide them by the number of garments that you are going to sell, or that at least you are going to manufacture each month, so that each garment has like their share of those operating costs. As I personally don't know what are the operating costs of Shein or of this German brand, I'm not going to do this kind of calculation. So we are going to use the other method that is way easier. And it's probably what you're going to see in a lot of websites that says like how to price your product if you're going to sell it online. And that is to multiply the costs of manufacturing your garment. So the cost that we have already calculated, multiplying that by 3. And that is because all of those operating costs tend to amount to a percentage that is around there. So we are going to do that. We have our Shein t-shirt that costs €1 to manufacture, and then we can only multiply that by 2 because otherwise we would be over the actual selling price of the garment. But let's justify that by saying that Shein makes a really big quantity of garments, so the percentage of the price of each garment that account for those operating costs is smaller. And also Shein is probably saving some money on those operating costs by not having probably a full team of designers, because usually they tend to copy other brands or at least get very, very, very inspired by other brands. And probably they also don't do a complete fit test of all of their garments. They probably don't make unique patterns for each style, and they probably don't do all of those sample rounds to perfect the fit of each garment. And then Carmi's t-shirt, which costs around €19 to make, if we multiply that by 3, we get around €57. That still gets us a profit margin of €38. So what do we do with that profit? Do we buy a house in the Bahamas? Not really. If you want to have a viable and sustainable business, you need that profit to reinvest into your business. You need to invest in things like funding the development of your next collection, or hiring more employees so your business can grow, or maybe improving the conditions of your current employees, like giving them higher wages, or maybe also researching new materials that are more sustainable. And you also have to take into account that with inflation and the cost of living rising every year, the materials for your next collection are likely going to cost more than the materials that you are using for this collection. So you always have to have a margin to account for that. That means that a big chunk of that profit margin is already spoken for. And we also haven't talked about what happens when you sell your garments wholesale. We are not going to touch on that in this video, but that would mean that you would also need to increase your prices around double or 3 times. But at this point, look at our Shein t-shirt. We have already arrived at that €2 selling price. So if we want to have that profit margin that it's going to keep our business viable in the long term, we would have to cut even more corners in the other steps of the manufacturing and the materials so that we can lower the production price and increase our margin. We already said that we are working with no design team and no fit test. So what else can we reduce? So we have the materials and the labor cost. Maybe we will be able to find an even cheaper polyester fabric, or maybe we are going to reduce the salary of our employees that, remember, we are already paying €1 per hour and they don't have any bathroom break. And the lower quality fabric will probably mean that the t-shirt will look like shit whenever we wash it like 2 times. So if we ask ourselves now which one of these t-shirts is the better deal, what would be your answer? Maybe pause the video for a minute and write that down in the comments. But even knowing all of the things that are behind Shein's pricing, we still look at a t-shirt that costs €95 and we think that is too expensive. And a lot of us cannot afford that, or at least we cannot afford it at the rate of consuming fashion that we are currently having. Nowadays, we buy around 60% more clothes than what we used to buy 15 years ago. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you not to buy stuff because I don't have any authority to do that. The interesting part of that question for me would be, why is it that a garment that seems reasonably priced according to all of our calculations still seems to us as some kind of extravagant luxury? The answer to that has a lot to do with the fact that our baseline for judging whether a garment is cheap or too expensive, it's completely fact. Clothes are pretty much the only thing that hasn't gone up in price during the last few decades. And that is even considering inflation and the costs of living rising. Since factories discovered that they could manufacture overseas in countries with little to no labor regulations, and that they could do that using lesser quality materials, the focus in fashion has shifted from having better things to just having more things. Because the best way for these corporations to make a profit is to be able to sell us as many things as possible and as quickly as possible. They have made us change our perspective of clothing from something that was to be valued and cared for to something that is to be used and discarded. Something that doesn't really deserve much attention. Because if we paid attention, we would realize that our garments are shit. They are badly made with bad quality materials and they lose all their appeal after the second or third time that we are wearing them. So we have to run and buy another shitty t-shirt to replace it, and so on. We actually have studies that show that we tend to discard around 60% of the clothing that we have during the first year of owning them. So with these 2 t-shirts, we have had a more clear idea of what we are paying for when we buy a piece of clothing. Sometimes we are paying for natural materials and quality production techniques, but also for fair wages and ethical working conditions. Other times we are paying for fabrics made of plastic and for companies to be treating their workers under conditions that could qualify as modern slavery. However, with this video, I don't mean to say that more expensive prices always correlate with more quality and better working conditions. Here's a t-shirt from Loro Piana that costs around €500. I can't for the life of me justify that price. But I don't know, maybe the workers get a free massage 3 times a day. If that's the case, good for them. But on the other side, there have been several reports of luxury brands like Armani recently that shown the products being made in terrible working conditions. So just because something is impossibly expensive, it doesn't mean that it has to be better or better made. We have still to do our research. But what we can be sure about is that when something is impossibly cheap, it does mean that someone is cutting way too many corners. We know that no matter how we look at it, there is no ethical way of making a t-shirt that costs €2 and is still making a profit. For it to have that price, someone else is likely paying the cost. So I hope we all have learned something today. I'm super interested about this topic, so I would love for you to write down your thoughts in the comments. And I actually have other videos talking about fashion industry issues, so if that's your thing, go and watch them. And for now, have a lovely rest of your day and see you soon in the next video.